Anand, welcome to the show. It's such an honor and
Hi,
pleasure to
thank
have
you.
you. You've had a successful career as an SNC for one plus decade almost, specifically in the field of cricket. So, how did it all start from your end? So, we can kick things off by giving the viewers a brief description about your journey so far and your current role at NCA. But what I'm particularly interested is the story. What brought you to the field of SNC? How did it all start, and how did you work your way up from there?
Yeah, it all started in my school or college days, you can say, where I was just like every other SNC. I started as a budding sports person, wanted to be a successful sports person. I was playing cricket and a bit of football in my college days, and along with that, I started training, right? And I literally started training in akhada type gym, uh, and I was side by side. Playing cricket and football for college. And I literally started in a gym where you can't touch weights unless you can do 100 dunks and 100 biceps, that type of a
Yeah,
scenario, right? Which was good to build a foundation as far as physical constitution is concerned, right? But it didn't really transfer onto the ground for the sport. In fact, in some cases, it worked a little bit in a negative sense. Not to say that that was the reason I fell behind in sports. I mean, that's not really a reason, but that's how it started. And as I graduated, I realized that I need to find other avenues to build a successful career. I look back at my journey of sports person in college and how the physical fitness was something that I was inclined towards more, and I decided to pursue that, and went to US to do my masters in sports science. And as I enrolled in a university in USA, I entered a whole different world of sports science and specifically strength and conditioning. Uh, Fortunately, the school I enrolled in was a NCAA Division One school with specific focus on American football uh, and basketball, and they had an entire department of strength and conditioning dedicated to the university athletes, as is typically a case in most of the US universities. And I enrolled as an intern in the department of strength and conditioning for my university, and I interned with them for almost close to my entire duration of masters.
right.
And that's how I came to know about strength and conditioning, right? And that was really a beginning, you can say.
Right. These stories are always interesting to me because all of us would have either played a sport or would have been in the gym for quite some time while we were growing up, and we never really wanted to let go of that environment, and we were looking for options to see what will keep us close to weights or field, and that is how most of us get our career started.
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
last chat that I was having with Saga, your current colleague and my ex-colleague,
Hmm. Yeah.
post that interview, I had quite a lot of queries about certain topics that people would like to hear from people in the field of cricket. So to kick things off,
Hmm.
I saw one of your previous interviews where you briefly touched upon LTAB model. So
Hmm.
is there any cricket specific LTAB model in existence? And if so, how does it look like in your understanding?
Yeah, good question. In cricket, ECB, South Africa cricket and New Zealand cricket have done significant work in youth development or long term athlete development. They have devised their own LTAD models, right? Uh, they don't look too dissimilar to traditional Istvan Bali's long-term athlete development model in a sense that they have the stages of fundamentals and learning to train, training to train, training to compete. That sort of a thing. It is contextualized for cricket, of course, with certain drills and stuff, but that's how it is. I mean, it is not really too specific to cricket, I would say. I mean, I personally feel that it is not. It is a bit of a complex process to build. I won't say long term athlete development because there's just one approach to looking at the entire concept of youth training, right? But it's
Right.
it's it's a complex process to build a model like that. especially in a game like cricket, because two foundational principles kind of cross paths, in a sense that from coaching perspective, for development of neural pathways, the the volume of skill load needs to be there, ever present, right from the early age. In most cases, coaches will frown upon the concept of early not having early specialization, right? And as
Yeah.
opposed to that, the most of the youth development models talk about multifactorial development, or participating in different sports, sampling years, monitoring and kind of controlling the skill workload in the early ages. So the paths kind of crisscross, and that's where the implementation becomes a little bit of an issue. So there are models, to answer the question to the point. There are models developed by certain bodies in cricket, but especially in an Indian context, work needs to be done. Uh, another factor that comes into play in Indian context is the training age. Our guys, although the things have got better, still don't start training from early age. So even though they're in a phase of where they should be training to compete,
Yeah.
their training age won't really allow them to do that, because they will still have minimal training age. So how do we counter that? Uh, that doesn't really fall with the typical LTAD model. So those things makes it a bit complex, and work needs to be done to formulate a LTAD or YPD type model for Indian cricketers.
Yeah, so the general trend seems to be in our country, at least, that people early specialize in the field of cricket as well. Because if you look at a lot of academies that breed young cricketers or young athletes, most of them are confined to cricket or whatever they might get exposed to in their school. That's the extent of it. So, in your opinion, is it good? And when you deal with cricketers in the age of 16 to 19, what are the demerits that you generally find of such early specialization?
Uh, I personally don't think it's a good thing to do. To be honest, from the purely from the physical development point of view, right? And I'm biased on this, and the skill coaches might disagree a little bit. But from the physical development point of view, it is not really ideal
Mhm.
to specialize too early, because what happens is you significantly reduce the probability to have a sustained successful career as you grow, because you expose an athlete to the risk of burnout.
Yeah.
And in India, it doesn't really get noticed because we play the volume game,
Mhm.
especially in a sport like cricket, where we have thousands playing cricket or lakhs playing cricket, and when we find 15 young cricketers representing country at the under 19 levels or under 16 levels, and being there or thereabouts in the World Cup final every other year, we tend to neglect or kind of uh, drop under the carpet the fact that there are hundreds who have failed to make the grade,
Mhm.
to make those 15 members. Uh, and and that's one of the reasons I feel it's not really ideal. Uh, I don't think I have a solution to that as such, practical solutions to that as such as of now. But that is something that we all should put our heads to find out how we can expose our young cricketers to multifactorial development from young age, uh, rather than making them early specialized.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So, with such a narrow exposure to physical development, when you see young kids whom you've trained, who probably represented the state or country in the sub junior, under 16, and under 19 levels, what are the common themes of injuries or burnout or overtraining patterns that you find in those athletes who've just been very narrow in their physical development?
Yeah, so you will typically see the muscle strains and soft tissue injuries happening to a lot of athletes who don't really have a training age and get exposed to uh, not only high workload but high workload in different aspects. So sometimes you get an athlete who is only used to playing or practicing cricket skills 4 hours a day, getting exposed to practicing skills 4 hours a day plus training 1.5 hours a day. So that's
Mhm.
not only a spike in the workload, but also an increase in different types of stimuli. So that's where they start uh, responding a bit negatively, and a lot of soft tissue or muscle strain injuries, which in fact recently we did injury surveillance last year. It is not specific to youth, but we found a lot of uh, thigh injuries, shoulder injuries, knee injuries with all types of athletes. And ECB recently published a long 9-year long longitudinal study in which they found similar findings as such. Along with that, especially with youth athletes, especially with fast bowlers, you would see increasing trend of say stress injuries, especially lumbar stress injuries, which can
Mhm.
happen with most of the young fast bowlers. So those are kind of the trends that we see.
Great. So, in the context of skill acquisition and skill stabilization, how much do you think broad exposure to a physical development program would help them? Talking specifically in the context of cricket, would it be of any merit for them to have been exposed to such a wide array of physical activities while they were growing up if they were to acquire and stabilize cricket related skills?
No, I feel it will definitely help them because cricket being a field sport, it definitely comprises of at least one mother sport that is running. Uh,
Mm.
Plus, jumping and landing are important skills that cricketers must have, along with diving. Uh, Throwing is big part of cricket, so that's another fundamental skill that cricketers need to have. Uh, More than anything else, or more than all of these factors, cricket is by nature a unilateral sport. That is, sport played by on one side predominantly, and also repetitive sport of repetitive nature. So you perform unilateral work repetitively. That could lead
Yeah.
to a lot of bias as far as your movement patterns are concerned. And if your physical development is not uh, multifactorial, multidimensional, then it can lead to a lot of movement discrepancies or biases. So that's to avoid that. I feel it is important that we have guys who have wide array of skills, physical skills, by playing
Mhm.
multiple sports. And playing cricket within multiple environments is also key, because that is another thing that has gone down recently. Uh, what I mean by that is, in early days, you would find cricketers playing a lot of what in Western world they call backyard cricket. In India, it's called gully cricket, tennis
Yeah.
ball cricket, plastic ball cricket, cricket being played on beaches. That has gone down a bit because the lifestyle has changed. Also, those scenarios where what you can call a free play, where there was no coaching intervention, and you kind of have to self-organize while competing. That's also
Yeah.
a dimension that one should develop in order to cope with the increasing workloads of more regimented approach of coaching and competitive cricket. Right, so that's also a part of multi-dimensional development. It's not only about participating in different sports, but it's also about participating in that particular sport in different scenarios.
Mm. So let's take a scenario of an athlete who've represented the country in under 19 or the senior team. They are truly playing the form of elite sport, if you look at the level at which they are playing, but they may not be truly elite in terms of physical development. So, with such an athlete, how much of specificity would you install into the program that they follow, strength or conditioning related programs?
So by specificity, you would mean the skill-based specificity or
Yeah,
yeah, that kind of thing, right? Okay.
cricket based specificity. Yeah.
Yeah, cricket-based specificity. Yeah, well, when it comes to them representing an under 19 or under 16 side at the national level, uh, not under 16 as much, but at least under 19, we try and plan the programs or periodize the programs in such a way that they reach certain level of specificity um, before our major tournaments like our Asia Cups and World Cups.
Mhm.
But that all depends on the starting point. And that's where the system really comes into play. So for example, if there is an under 19 cricketer who has been part of the overall structures from his under 16 days, then we probably have seen him for 2 3 years
Yeah.
and kind of have built him up to a stage where his training can be specific
Mhm.
when he represents under 19. But in as outliers, there could be athletes who would come into the fold straight at under 19, or even in extreme cases, just 2 or 3 months before the major tournament. Uh, and if their training background is not really up to a level where their training can be specific, then we'll have to kind of bite the bullet because it. I mean, the way I see it, it's always about, yes, specificity is the king, but it's always about following the right pathway of progression because it's about bigger picture. So the
Mm.
chronological age assessed through fitness test, movement patterns assessed through movement assessments. All these things will determine his training approach and training program, which will organically feed into the specificity, which is a byproduct, if I'm making sense,
Yeah, yeah,
as
completely.
opposed to giving a specific fast bowling based program to a bowler without having any regards for his actual fitness levels and movement issues.
Mm.
I wouldn't recommend that.
So, are the kids and parents sort of receptive to the inputs that we provide as SNCs in the field of cricket to managing their workload or anything related to mitigating their injury risk? What do you see the trend is within Indian cricketers who are still developing to the elite level?
No, as far as parents and players themselves are concerned, they are quite receptive. I would say, in my experience, they are like sponge. They want to know and they want to implement. I mean, every kid or parents who have got to a level where they have been selected as top 25 under 16 boys, they know that they have a future if they put in the hard work. So they are quite receptive. But the question is if the system allows them to do that, and it's not a critical point as such towards the system. But what I mean by that is, by nature, cricket is a game that and or any sport for that matter. I mean, if you want to play at a higher level, you have to perform to get selected. To
Yeah,
be able to perform, you need to play, and and to be able to be playing in a top side of your environment. So, for example, your state teams or your zonal teams, you need to be playing the lower level cricket consistently.
yeah,
So, like I mentioned earlier, the philosophy is crisscross with the practicalities a little bit. So, implementation may not happen 100%, but that's not down to the issues with parents or kids. It's down to the issues with, I would say, as a more affirmative approach, we as SNCs and sports science personnel should do more to find solutions to navigate through the structural challenges that we have, because those will remain, because that's how the ecosystem has developed as far
yeah.
as the performance and selection is concerned. So yeah, so the parents and kids are fine actually.
Great. So for us to give them some sort of direction to work towards managing their workload, someone who is still in the developing stages, what would your suggestions be for a young cricketer? And how is it different from the elite players?
Yeah, good question. So workload with young cricketers, uh, it's really about understanding three important points. If I have to encapsulate in three, in just thinking aloud, uh, one is to understand there is a difference in growth, development, and maturation, and those will have effect on the way you move and the way your body reacts to the load, especially in specific phases of your development. And the local agencies, and also from the national cricket academies point of view, we should be able to give them specific inputs with regards to concepts such as peak height, velocity, pace, the growth spurt, and how that should be considered while deciding whether the kid should be exposed to the workload in that period or not. That is one part.
Right.
Second part uh, is to know the basic uh, what you say, the general adaptation syndrome that we all learned in our fundamental years, which stays true mostly uh, uh, with regards to any new stimulus. So any new stimulus on your body is going to have slightly negative effects uh, in first few weeks. It is natural, it is expected, and it is not something to run away from, but it is something that needs to be understood and managed. So, for example, if your kid does strength session for the first time, he's expected to get sore for next 2 3 days.
Yeah.
If he's not able to bowl to his maximum capacity during those 2 3 days, it's not down to strength training. It is down to a natural process which is happening. So the workloads will need to be managed in those phases. So that's another point. And the third, from the practical point of view, if nothing else works, the only thing that the most important thing that one should consider is the load density. The load density will actually determine what kind of effect it is going to have on your body more than anything else. There are a lot of suggestions from specific number point of view, like you should be bowling only this much. Kids from this age to this age should bowl these many overs in one spell. Only 2 days in a week. At least 48 hours gap between two sessions. Like I mentioned before, the ecosystem doesn't really allow it to happen all the time. So to make it simple, what we need to kind of understand is workload density matters a lot. So how much workload you are putting your kid into in what time. If you can spread it out across a certain time period, a lot of the issues that can come out of workload can be mitigated.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So and another thing is workload monitoring is not about controlling or reducing the workload. I mean, workload monitoring kind of get a bad rap with coaches and parents sometimes, because it is being looked at. It generally gets looked at as, oh, workload monitoring means you can't bowl more than 5 hours, or workload monitoring means you can't bat today. Workload monitoring is about ensuring that the athlete gets the adequate amount of workload so that he is physically ready for what he is going to get exposed to.
Yeah.
So workload monitoring works in two ways. It's also about making sure that the athlete gets enough rest and the workload density is taken care of. But it's also about making sure that athlete has sufficient workload or even more than sufficient workload so that he can sustain the competitive loads.
Makes sense.
Right. So if you know that in season athlete is going to bowl 40 overs in the span of 4 weeks, your preparation 5 to 6 weeks before should have 10 to 12 hours per week so that your athlete is ready. That's
Makes
workload
sense.
monitoring.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So while I was preparing for my UKSCA case study, so it was a cricketer on whom I did my case study for UKSCA. So while I was going through the literature, there isn't many that's from India, and India being a country where cricket is a religion, what do you think we can do in terms of driving the sports science community in creating more and more data and relevant research studies so that we have something to work towards?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is something that we need to work on, because, like you said, India is really a hotbed for the scientific research, especially in cricket, right? Because of the sheer volume and the diversity in volume that we have,
Yeah.
and one of the things that we should and we are striving to achieve is more coordination and collaboration among all the stakeholders. So national cricket academy or national body working with the state associations, working with the clubs, working with the academies at the private level or schools, that will allow a significant data collection. The efforts have already been initiated. Like I mentioned before, last year, our physiotherapy department conducted an injury surveillance during the season, which was one of its kind and one of the important steps towards understanding the effects of competitive cricket on cricketers and where our efforts should be directed. The things are in process, but like you said, more needs to be done in terms of collaboration with different stakeholders, and that is where the effort should be made.
Great. That reminded me of your collaborative approach model that you presented for ASCA conference. It was an excellent presentation. So could you expand a little bit upon the concept of collaborative approach model?
Sure. It stems from my experience so far working as a strength and conditioning coach with NCA, because a lot of my work drives towards rehabilitative strength and conditioning with injured athletes. The key element in successful rehab is ensuring that different stakeholders pull in the same direction as opposed to different directions, and to understand that at any given point, the athlete clinical health takes the forefront or the front seat, because the rehabilitation revolves around that. So there are two aspects typically in any rehab, as you would have experienced yourself. One is to ensuring that the injured part is healed properly and it gets back to its pre-injury state. And the second is to try and analyze and understand the root cause of an injury and use the time away from sport to work on that, to kind of bulletproof or make an athlete future proof as much as possible. It doesn't happen always, because we all know that the previous injury is the greatest predictor of the next injury. But if there is a root cause that can be analyzed to the best of the practitioner's abilities, that can be worked upon during the rehab. But for that to happen, there has to be a collaborative approach. So what I did was, and to achieve that, it's best to work backwards from your estimated date of return, because it kind of allows you to have a snapshot of what kind of journey an athlete will have. You can break it down into different milestones, and then it makes it easier for everyone to follow that path. And within that, there are different stages where different stakeholders work will drive the whole process, and that's what collaborative approach is in my mind. So the healing stage, recuperation stage, achieving the clinical fitness level, that stage, all that should be theoretically driven by the physiotherapist inputs, and the SNC's role is in support, where we ensure that we don't aggravate the injury, but make sure the athlete is staying active. Then we ensure that his general fitness is worked upon, and his recuperation is being helped on through certain stimulus and loading in a certain way. But as athlete progresses and it comes to return to the pre-injury fitness status, exposing athletes to gradual competitive stimulus so that he is ready for skill load, that's where SNC's role becomes a little bit more prominent, even though it is still driven through this clinical perspective, because it's always based on athlete's response to your stimulus, right? But that's how SNC's role evolves over the different stages of collaboration that you will have through the rehab process. And a skill coach definitely comes into play over here, because it's ultimately about athlete being able to perform skills, right? To the best of his ability pre-injury. And that's where a lot of other aspects, psychological aspects, technical aspects will also come into play. And that's where skill coach's role also becomes important. And it's important for all these three stakeholders and also the management to understand and appreciate different magnitude of roles that these individuals need to perform at different stages, so that better decisions can be made, better coordination can be sought, and then athlete ultimately gets benefit. So that's what the collaborative approach model was.
Great. So to shift gears from here a little bit, so how is working as an SNC in team environment different to working in the academy setup? This question came from a lot of aspiring SNCs who would like to work and position themselves as SNCs in team environment.
Right. No, it's a good question. That's an important question, and believe me, to find the answer to this question, you need to go through a lot of experiences, right?
Yeah.
And the most underwhelming answer to this is it is different, because yeah, everyone knows about it, right? It is different.
Yeah.
But I mean, the technical difference is pretty well known and widely discussed as far as the different training approach, training load is concerned. And
Mm.
most of us know that the training in academy when you're not competing is different than when you're competing. It's a
Yeah.
basic periodization concept that we learn. But more than anything else, it's about the mindset the athlete has uh, when he's in the academy and then he's in the team. Because when he's in the academy, uh, he is either preparing for that next competition. So he has in his mind he has dedicated this particular time to get as physically fit as possible
Mm.
and to work on specific things that will help him to compete.
Yeah.
Or he or she is recuperating from injury. So they want to do all they can to get better and get back on field.
Mm.
So it's a different mindset. When they are in the team, uh, uh, they have uh, they have different types of pressures from different angles. It's pressure to compete. It's pressure to be in the team. It's something very intangible that even they couldn't put their finger on. It's something
Mm.
that is bothering them on an actual field. Like I really am not getting a feel of batting, or I'm not really getting a feel of bowling. If those things are on their mind, uh, the training aspect comes on a little bit of a back burner from the mental side of things, right?
Right.
And as SNCs, we would be driven towards making sure that they are physically right up there,
Yeah.
uh, so that they can perform better. But at the same time, athlete might be thinking, physically I'm fine. Uh, I'm working on something else, and they may not communicate it to you, and it doesn't mean that they don't value physical aspect of things, but it's just that now is not the time. Uh, so in those times, I feel an SNC's role becomes more about being a supportive individual, and making sure that all the SNC related functions or activities provide them the positive experience rather than a daunting task that they need to complete.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I so that's how the SNC need to be flexible to kind of have this in mind that there are multiple ways to skin the cat, and sometimes it may not be about that most accurate, scientifically accurate way that I think. It sometimes it's about how this can give a positive experience to an athlete so that he gets into a best physical and mental space. I think that's
Makes sense.
that's the major difference uh, that in the mindset SNC should have while working in academy and team, and it comes with a lot of like I said, lot of experiences and time. I mean, it is natural for any SNC to have certain way of thinking when it comes to how training should go. Uh,
Mm.
but we are thinking as SNCs, and what we are thinking that what how physical preparation is going to help an athlete on the field.
Yeah.
Athlete's perception of the contribution of physical preparation in overall performance may be different, especially in a game like cricket where skill application depends on multiple other things.
Absolutely.
So that's how the difference should be considered.
Yeah. Have you had instances where an athlete, at least during the early stages of your career, where an athlete has been partially dismissive of the importance of physical fitness or strength and conditioning or the inputs that you give? I'm sure at the stage where you are right now, you probably will have solutions for it. But reflecting back on your past career, have you had instances like that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I did definitely. Fortunately, those instances have gradually gone down, um, because the athletes themselves have become much more aware and, in most cases, uh, innately motivated about getting fitter. as opposed to in my early days of working with cricket, where SNC was still penetrating. A lot of it was about, oh, cricket is a skill-based game. It is a skill-based game, yeah, but fitness matters, right? But that mindset was still penetrating. So at that time, at those times, I did have certain experiences, definitely. And as young SNC, I kind of tried to handle it in a certain way, and you can say succeeded a little bit, learned my lessons in other scenarios. But interestingly, I mean, I also learned one thing when it comes to a situation like this, that an athlete ignoring the fitness doesn't always mean that he doesn't think fitness is going to help him.
Hmm.
Sometimes it means that his perception of what fitness is going to help his sport doesn't match what we are offering.
Yeah, makes sense.
So there could be athletes who would be more inclined towards doing a lot of ground activities because that's what they have learned doing.
Hmm.
And if they've already been into the bracket of say 26, 27 years old, playing for the country or playing for the state teams, they might look with a frown on strength training. Like, we're giving just an example. Now, a typical mistake an SNC would make is to label that athlete as someone who is not interested in fitness.
Hmm.
Whereas the more affirmative approach is to kind of uh, dig into the way we have approached him towards fitness training, which has kind of driven him away in the first place.
Yeah.
So then, can we change our approach and 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 introduce an athlete to different stimulus that he has not been exposed to, and trying to get a buy-in? I think this is important because, again, with SNC, we tend to develop set ideologies that, okay, trying to get stronger, faster, you need to do your fundamental movements, you need to do your structural lifts, you need to do this, that. There might be athletes who are already springy, who have been sprinting on the ground from age 8 or 10, and
Absolutely.
all they have done is run around, jump. They won't respond to that type of stimulus. Mentally, it won't be stimulating to them. It will be kind of putting them off.
Hmm.
So then it's not, in that case, it's not that the athlete is not valuing fitness. It is your perception is not matching with his. So it's our responsibility to kind of change that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the inputs that you're giving, someone should go through this cycle of repetitive learning for them to clearly understand what it truly means to just take a step back, understand what the athlete needs, and then deliver to a best capacity. So theoretically, conceptually, people might get it who are starting off, but I think they should be put through the grind for them to completely understand how to behave in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's best to happen organically. I mean, uh, it, like you said, it might be, it will be difficult to kind of assimilate whatever we have discussed now, and to whenever get exposed to similar scenario next time. Oh, now it will be difficult to get it and
Yeah,
get it like that. It has to happen organically. But
right.
if you are aware about this, then you can respond better in the first instance rather than using the first instance as a learning curve, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, something on a lighter note, Anand, on reflection of your past career, what is your best moment as an SNC? One or
Oh,
many?
there are multiple. I would say the under 19 World Cup victory in New Zealand tops the chart. Uh, so is the under 19 experience in South Africa, even though it didn't end on the positive note. But I
Yeah,
have always enjoyed my journeys with the under 19 teams, three times that I had, because it's really a satisfactory experience to see athletes grow and get bought into the ideology of sports science and strength and conditioning. Like, I'm hopelessly biased about our field, and I used to get peeved off earlier, where from the athletes and coaches side, the value and respect that I felt was required was not given. But like I said, I learned my lesson and I understood that it's about difference in perception. But with the young players, that's not really an issue. They are like sponge, and I can look back and say that more than the World Cup victory or being in the final or quarterfinals, it's the percentage of the number of athletes that have gone through that that system of training that we implemented. The percentage of those who have stayed true with that lifestyle is uh, upwards to 70-80%, which
Great.
is satisfactory. So
Absolutely.
you will have the fast bowlers from the under 19 New Zealand batch uh, still bowling 140, still bowling and still focusing on their fitness uh, and completely getting bought into the idea of how fitness is going to help them, as opposed to handling an elite cricketer whose systems are set and not aligned with sports science. So that's definitely a satisfactory point. Some of the challenging rehabs that I have been fortunate to be part of, some tricky ACLs right before the Women's World Cup. Some of those things were definitely satisfactory, I would say. Yeah.
Do you have any darkest moment per se that you can recollect?
Yeah, there could be there could be few definitely since I've spent some time in cricket now. Uh, well, with regards to work, I could have done better in certain aspects and learned my lessons. So those were the darkest moments where you would thought things will go smoothly when a player came back after the major rehab,
Hmm.
and as things happen sometimes in those cases that a player got injured with some other injury. Those were kind of the darkest moments, I
Darkest
would
moment.
say. Yeah.
Great.
Also, with at the pump as being a part of the team SNC again, uh, the experience in South Africa was both satisfactory to an extent and also one of the darkest ones because we were so close,
Yeah.
but couldn't make it.
All right.
So that was one.
So, to a young aspiring SNC, not just from the field of cricket, any SNC, young and upcoming, if they were to give a hypothetical to-do list from which they can borrow from you, what would it comprise of? Something that they should definitely be doing on a daily basis to just work their way up the ladder.
Well, I would recommend. I mean, I feel it's a bit premature for me to start giving career advices because I mean, you and me are still making it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's for someone who is probably 10, 15 years older than me to do it. But yeah, I mean, from whatever I've learned so far, I value, personally, I value two things, and I ensure that I do two things as an SNC is to uh, keep studying and keep ourselves upgraded. And with the upcoming SNCs, especially, I would say the education is the most important aspect. Um, the qualifications and the accreditations, even though they get the bad rap, uh, in my view, are important and essential. And they get the bad rap because our field is more field based, uh, where through the experience and passion to know things, you can get a hang or hold of a subject. Like I
Yeah.
remember I had in South Africa, we were fortunate to be in Potchefstroom, which is kind of a sports hub of South Africa, in a university campus where a lot of Olympic athletes were training, and not only South African. There were multiple nationalities, and there was one Italian javelin thrower who I struck a conversation with and sat down to discuss certain things, and he explained things to me in a completely scientific manner, to an extent where I asked him, "Are you a sports science student?" And he said, "No, I'm not. But I didn't have a coach for last 3 years, so I studied on my own while preparing for my sport." So that's kind of a beauty of our field. But even then, and that's why the education and accreditation gets a bit of a bad rap, that whether it is necessary. But in my view, it is absolutely necessary, because ours is also one of the only fields which is not really insulated with the protected title. Like anyone can work as a strength and conditioning coach. Why it should be the case, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are certain pathways and certain educational qualifications that one needs to follow in any other field, but that shouldn't be the case with strength and conditioning. And I think this trend will grow as the ecosystem grows world over, especially in India. And and it is important to have the education and right qualifications and accreditation. But at the same time, like I said so far, I feel that practical impetus is extremely important. No amount of qualification will replace what you learn by actually getting your hands dirty. And sports participation is definitely one thing, but if you have kind of missed the bus or passed that stage, as a SNC, I feel the most important thing is to live a lifestyle of a strength and conditioning coach, which is eat, sleep, drink, fitness.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a SNC, if one of the first thoughts on your mind when you wake up is not about what you are going to train yourself on that day, then I feel something is missing.
Yeah.
So, as an upcoming SNC, I would recommend you to wholeheartedly follow two things: get right education and train yourself as hard as possible, because that's what has given me uh, a lot of confidence and a lot of tools to work with.
Great. So, what's next for you professionally?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm just striving to be as best strength and conditioning coach as possible. I mean, I think I have definitely have upwards to 2 decades to be on the floor and on the field where I want to be, uh, actually coaching athletes, and to to get as better as possible, to have more responsibilities at an organizational level, and also probably implement my own concept somewhere else. Uh, those are the things especially with the youth athlete development, which because I have spent major chunk of my career there, along with working with elite. And like I said, working with youth athletes have different challenges and different satisfaction points. And also from the Indian context of Indian SNC and sports ecosystem, youth athlete development is something which is important, right? But that's kind of uh, a hobby or side hustle thing, you can say.
Absolutely,
It,
absolutely.
it's yeah.
Well, thanks, Anand. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. It's definitely one step closer towards bringing the entire Indian SNC community to a collective unit. Thanks for making the time for this. Thanks for
Absolutely,
being a part
absolutely.
of this.
It was, it was pleasure. It was pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, and I must say that your efforts are really commendable. It's not easy to take time out in your daily grind and devote to something like this, and you have a vision to achieve that. And definitely, I'm sure we can do as a collective SNC field in India. We will do much better.
Definitely. Thanks, Anand. Thank you so much for making the time for this once
Thank you.
again.
Thank
We'll
you.
catch up
Thank you.
soon.